Hello, and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and other words too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sara.
And welcome to 2022. We made it.
We did. It is, in fact, a new year.
It's not actually a new year for us right now. We are lying to you. But you're going to hear it.
We're just talking from the future.
If we don't make it to 2022, this intro is going to be very ironic to the aliens who find it in a century.
I mean, we're almost there. So we should, in theory, make it to 2022.
I feel pretty safe assuming we're going to make it.
You're going to get snowed in and they'll never find you again.
I'm already snowed in. It's great. That's actually my good thing that happened this week. We have gotten like 8 inches of snow, maybe a little bit more where I am, but since Sunday, which doesn't mean anything to you guys, less than a week. And it's great. We can't go anywhere. I have only left my house once to check the mail because it's been like 20 degrees outside and that's too cold, but it's beautiful.
And you have a long way to go to your mailbox.
Yeah, I do.
It's not just like, for me, I just have to step outside and it's right by my front door. That is not the case for you.
I mean, crunching around in the snow for about 2 minutes is just fine. But having to actually do anything outside would be miserable right now. I've just been locked indoors with Daniel and our cats and too much food, and it's been great.
That sounds lovely.
We did have New Year's plans that we think we are probably going to miss because I don't want to drive in all of this slush.
Valid. That is very valid.
How about you, Sarah? What's something great that happened?
My good thing is that I made barbecue pulled pork and coleslaw sliders on Hawaiian rolls, and they were delicious.
You're not allowed to say that and not mail some to me.
I'm sorry, you just have to come and visit.
I guess. But it's snowing. I can't leave my house.
If it's any consolation, they were very easy to make. So I can definitely make some for you next time we are in close proximity.
I'm going to hold you to that.
Okay.
Well, zooming in a little bit from broad picture to now, what are you drinking tonight?
I have made myself a dark and stormy.
Love those.
Because I had limes and I had some ginger beer. So, and I had rum. I don't always have any of those 3 things, actually. What are you drinking tonight?
I am drinking, there's no way to say this that's not going to make somebody mad at me. Decaffeinated Earl Grey with Hennessy.
That sounds, like someone is going to get mad. And that someone is me.
Yep. I really enjoy warm cocktails, especially when it's fucking freezing outside. And I didn't want caffeine, so
I'll let it slide just this once.
It actually is quite nice. I didn't add any sugar to it or milk or anything, which I often do. But yeah, just the tea and the alcohol. It's a good combo.
It is a good combo, though. It's hard to go wrong with that.
It's true. Well, Sarah, have you read anything good lately?
I read A Psalm for the Wild Built by Becky Chambers, which is a novella. You have a copy of it because I accidentally bought 2. And I really, really loved it. If I had read it before we recorded our Best of 2021 episode, it would have made it on that list. It was just really quiet and comforting. And this is going to sound really dumb, but it felt like reading a good book with a cup of tea. Like that's how it felt.
That was the vibe, yeah.
Yeah, that was the vibe, which is appropriate because it's all about tea.
Oh, well, yes. That sounds like it fits perfectly.
Yes. But I was having kind of a reading slump and it helped break me out of that. So have you read anything good with all of this snow keeping you indoors?
I actually have for once. I picked back up The Mare Cycle by Dan Fitzgerald. I started it on a camping trip back in August and haven't been able to pick it back up since then, just because of time and everything. And I only say that because I was able to pick this book back up. I was in the middle of book 2, and actually in the middle of a sex scene in the middle of book 2. And I only had to go back like a page. I don't usually put books down for that long, or if I do, I just start them over because it's hard to keep all of that stuff in your head and all of the characters and narratives and everything. But it was so easy to just jump back into that world. And like I said, I did start the immediate action over again. But I was really impressed with how accessible it was, even a couple months after I had started the series. So that was very nice.
I really need to pick up book 2. I read book 1 and loved it, but I haven't had a chance to continue with the series yet. We will incidentally be talking with Dan. The episode should come out at the end of January, not about this series, but about The Living Waters, which is the first book in his new duology. So that'll be exciting. Keep your ears out for that.
I have to say, I mean, only halfway through book 2 out of the trilogy of the Mare cycle that I'm reading. I really do. It feels much more like one book that got split into 3. And apparently now there is a version that is all 3 of them printed together.
Yes, there is an omnibus edition.
That makes me feel both vindicated and extremely annoyed. That's not the version I got.
I don't think that the omnibus version is print.
Oh,
I think that might be ebook only.
Gotcha. Well, anyway, to you, I say, you've basically just read the first third of a book, so you really ought to pick the next one up.
I really do. It's true.
Well, Sarah, here we are, not actually in 2022, but we're going to pretend we are for the sake of podcast magic.
We're only like 2 days off, a day and a half off.
For some reason, that feels like lying, even though everyone knows that we publish our podcast a little bit after the fact, just because that's how time works.
These are not live, surprising no one.
But we do have almost a year of podcasting behind us now. And we do have a couple of things we wanted to talk about, just to address. I don't know. That makes it sound much more serious than it is.
To sum up our year?
Yeah, the first one, I should actually look up how much money we donated, because that is relevant.
Yeah, you may recall that we were running a donation for Dolly Parton's Imagination Library, where we had a corporate sponsor who would match all of the donations that were made and we heard about. And we raised over
a number I'm going to do math for right now.
We should have put this in a spreadsheet.
Yeah. We raised $650, which is fantastic. Thank you, everyone, so much who donated. Dan, you did send us an email from April, which was technically not against the rules, so we did count it. Yeah, we just wanted to do this mostly for the heck of it. Thank you, everyone, for participating and boosting the signal and everything. We're really glad we got the opportunity to do this, and not that we did very much overall, but
we did not.
We did get to slap our names on it. So just thank you again. We didn't know really what to expect from trying this, but I'm glad we did.
I think it worked out, and $650 is a lot of books for kids.
Yeah.
So win-win all around.
The other thing that we wanted to talk about moving into the new year is how all of our episodes have been late.
Not, in your defense, not all of them have been late as in released on a day other than the Wednesday that we intended to release them on.
That is technically correct, which is the best kind of correct. So we talked about this and are going to experiment with a different format. Not that different. We're going to be doing one book per episode instead of trying to cram 2 books into one episode. Our conversations have been getting longer and longer.
It's almost like we like talking to each other.
I know, right? And have things to say. And I felt bad cutting stuff just for the sake of an arbitrary time limit / needing to edit the whole thing before it was supposed to come out. So basically that just means more shorter episodes, but the same general content schedule.
We're still going to be covering the same amount of books. It's just that instead of having an official bi-weekly release, we will be releasing every week, but one book per week. Plus sometimes bonus things.
Yeah. You're still going to try to do bonus episodes. We'll see. It's all fluid. We're trying it out. We'll see how long it lasts. I think it'll be good though. Just knowing my procrastination tendencies.
I think you'll have the same amount of editing, but it'll be split over a longer period of time. So I think it'll work out.
I think so.
We'll see.
I don't know. It's interesting. In our first conceptualization for this podcast, we had talked about doing many segments, one of which being a book, and then maybe other off-topic conversations per episode. Because I think, and I am quoting our original outline format here, we couldn't possibly talk about one book for more than 15 minutes, right?
It's really funny. We have an episode outline template in Google Docs that we use for all of our episodes. And so we'll say book, 15 minutes. And we never, ever stick to that.
No. And I think it's silly to pretend that we will.
Yeah, I mean, I should probably actually remove that from our episode outline. I just haven't bothered because we ignore it anyway, but
it's funny. It's mostly funny. Anyway, so that's all. I guess that is not really any different, except that, yeah, twice as many, half as long episodes.
In theory.
In theory.
Instead, you'll get twice as many, just as long episodes.
I don't think I could do that. It'd start getting late again.
I don't think that we should do that. I am mostly joking.
Yeah, I'm not joking about the bonus episodes, though, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, we will see how it goes.
The problem is there are so many books we want to read. How are we supposed to fit them in 1 year? Or not a year, but a reasonable time frame.
This is why our calendar is built out through 2024.
Not filled out. Just
not filled out.
For today.
Wheel of Time check-in.
Oh, really? You're making me do that? It's Christmas.
I told you that I was going to. This is the season finale.
All right.
I want to talk just a little bit about the season finale. I'll keep it brief.
Tell me why I should care about the season finale.
Well, I'm going to say that the first time I watched it, I was really disappointed in it.
Mm-hmm.
It just, like, the pacing was really fast, and I didn't feel like any of the storylines had time to breathe, and it just didn't work for me. Seen on its own, without having rewatched any of the other episodes. I mean, obviously, I'd watched episode 7 the week before, but just on its own, I was like, this is the worst episode of the season. I'm really kind of let down by this. And then I forced my parents to watch Wheel of Time with me. I say forced. I knew that they would enjoy it. They did enjoy it. So it's not like I was making them watch something that I thought they were going to hate. But we watched Wheel of Time over Christmas together. And when seen as a whole, I liked episode 8 a lot more. I still think that it was the weakest episode of the season, or like second weakest episode of the season, maybe. But it felt much more cohesive when I had the context of everything else immediately backing it up.
If you ever need someone to convince you to not read or watch Wheel of Time, just ask a Wheel of Time fan. And they will do a great job.
You've already said that you would read book 1 for the podcast at some point.
Yeah, sure. I'll probably watch more of the show too.
Well, you'll probably watch some of season 2.
That is just because I already own the book and it is a no buy for me.
I bet that I could have convinced you to read. I'm not trying to convince you to read the series. I don't think you would enjoy it. I don't think that you have any interest in it. I'm not going to do that to you. But I bet that I probably could have convinced you to read book 1 for the podcast anyway.
Probably the library has it. You're right.
Yeah. You don't have to buy it.
Exactly.
Anyway, those were just my feelings on the season finale. We don't have to go into any depth or anything.
Well, I'm sorry it was not what you wanted, but sounds like maybe it was not as bad as you thought.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad as I thought. And you won't have to sit through another Wheel of Time check-in until season 2. And I don't know when that's going to be, so you've got some time to recover. So the book that we are reading for this episode is Nophek Gloss by Essa Hansen. And I wanted to read it, A, because it sounded great, but B, because Essa Hansen is just really, really cool. She is a sound designer at Skywalker Sound, so she works on like Marvel films, and she also does falconry. And like, if that's not the greatest thing ever, I don't know what is.
A surprising lack of falcons in this book, though.
There were not a lot of falcons in this book. It's true.
This was a very good book. It's pretty long, which I'm only saying because I'm trying to formulate what percentage of this book it took for me to really get into it.
I really enjoyed it as well. The book is about 400 pages.
But they're tall pages. These are not trade paperback pages.
Yeah, but the font is fairly large and well-spaced too.
Okay, fair enough. This is why pages are a useless metric for books. I'm finding a word count.
A word count. But I was going to say that like you, I had a little bit of trouble getting into it. It was really at about the halfway mark that it clicked for me. And then I just absolutely adored it.
Halfway sounds about right for me as well. There were some aspects that made it hard to really dive into this story. I think the first one, or for me at least, being the prose, was not entirely to my taste overall, with the added layer of there being quite a few sci-fi jargon words, so many different species and places and titles that I felt like I was translating like half of each sentence and then spending the other half trying to get into the prose, which was, like I said, not my cup of tea, which made it a little bit of a struggle. However, the story was so fast-paced, it just kind of dragged me along through all of that and like punched on to the other side, and it was all right.
Yeah, I didn't have an issue with the prose. I know we tend to have very different thoughts on prose. And I also didn't mind all of the sci-fi words. There were quite a bit, but for the most part, I found that I was able to just kind of gloss over them. That is a pun on the title. I just realized. Sorry, not sorry.
You glossed over all of those luminous sci-fi words?
Yes. And when they showed up regularly enough, I started like catching on to what they meant and their importance. And really, that was all I needed.
I'm usually pretty good at glossing over things. Is that a terrible thing to say? Just kind of rolling with it and trying to figure stuff out from context clues. But I feel like a lot of the descriptions for the alien races, a lot of the descriptions were extremely visual, which was great, except did not give me a lot of context for remembering, was there another character like this that we've met? Are they, intimidating the main character or being nice to the main character, or like what's going on? But I could tell you, how tall they were. It was fine. I got there. The prose was, like I said, a stumbling block, but not, I would say, an issue overall.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
And the pacing. I cannot say this enough. It was so fast-paced. Like, so much happens in this book.
There is a lot that happens, which is great. I think you have a point in our notes about how it could have been made into a trilogy.
A coward would have made this book a trilogy.
This book in particular, because there is this, like, I think it is actually a trilogy. There is a sequel that's coming out, but
it's fine that it's a series. I'm saying, like, this story, I could definitely see, especially in sci-fi fantasy, they get stretched out so much, and it's like, it's unnecessary.
Yeah, but I think that it works very, very well as a single story.
There's no bloat at all. It's so to the point. It was a very good read.
Yeah.
A very brutal read. There's a lot of violence in this book.
There's a lot of violence.
A lot of trauma and dealing with that trauma and not actually dealing with that trauma at all. There
are also very cool animal companions.
Oh, yes. Wait, I have more trauma though.
Okay, we can talk more about trauma.
The animal companions are great, and I do want to talk about them.
And the animal companions, the Whipkin helps the characters deal with their trauma. There's your lead-in.
The doctor character at one point leaves a note and says, "Animals are good for pain. I prescribe like 3 cuddles or something. Not like that cutesy. Yeah, painkiller. I prescribed this Whipkin as painkiller," and that was so sweet.
Yeah, that was a great moment.
Okay, but part of why the beginning of this book was so hard for me to like get through, because like I said, there's so much happening in the plot that I was able to just plow through it. But the main character, Kaiden or Caden, jury's out on that one, is a traumatized 14-year-old.
You use Kaiden, I'll use Caden. Between the two of us, one of us will be right.
Perfect. So the main character, Kaiden, is sort of in this cycle of making very bad decisions, realizing he's in over his head and is making bad decisions, and then promising himself he's going to listen to people who have more experience than him. And then they say something he doesn't like. And so he immediately makes another bad decision. And just like that cycle over and over again for like the first half of the book. And that doesn't feel unrealistic. It doesn't make me dislike him, because like I'm completely sympathetic. I get it. He's in a terrible position and he's doesn't have all of the resources necessary to like actually make good decisions. But it's just really hard to read, and it's
hard to watch someone do that and repeat their mistakes and not learn from them.
Just constant. Well, the problem was he at least nominally was learning from them. I think if his internal monologue hadn't been, "Oh gosh, like I am clearly out of my depth and need help and shouldn't be making these decisions every single time," it would have been less frustrating, because like he clearly knew what he was doing, but was still doing it, which again is totally something that happens. I get that. It's just not fun to read about for 200 pages.
Yeah, I think that's valid.
That's all.
I had a similar issue in that I thought that the first half was a little more difficult to get through, partly because like I said, it was just hard to see someone do that. And he did go through an awful lot of trauma.
Yeah, so it's not his fault, but he's still doing it. I blame the adult characters around him for going through the exact same cycle of, wow, this kid really needs help. Well, he's not really one of us though, so we're going to leave him to his own devices. What do you mean this kid left to his own devices made a bad decision? And like doing that constantly over and over again.
They definitely deserve some of the blame. I mean, they're also traumatized by different things. So I can understand why they would not want to let someone in. But that doesn't absolve them of the blame.
And they stay in this middle ground where they get mad about dealing with the consequences of Kaiden's actions, but they're dealing with the consequences of his actions because they're choosing to, and because they didn't give him other help earlier. And so it's like, well, either you don't want to deal with him or you do. Don't just sit in this middle ground making it worse for everybody.
I agree, but I also think that we see different levels of that with the different characters. Like, it's not that everyone is ignoring his problems.
No, that's true. And this isn't through the whole book. It's for enough of the beginning that I did grow concerned that it would be the whole book, because how many times can Kaiden do the same thing and not learn from it? But his character does eventually grow, and then I think that is exactly the point. I think we actually identified the same exact moment in the book where we were 100% on board.
We did have the same point there.
But that's a spoiler.
That is a spoiler. So we won't talk about that just yet. One of the things that I really liked, and I know that you said that you found all of the descriptions of aliens to be a little hard to parse sometimes, but I loved that it really felt alien. Like, there was a lot of cool aliens and cool technology, and it didn't just feel kind of like Star Trek regurgitated.
No, I agree completely. It wasn't, parts of this book, aspects of this book reminded me of The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet.
Yeah.
It's a fish out of water, sort of interacting with this wider universe and sort of finding their place in it. But I mean, that's where the comparison ends. they're different books. Do not go into this book thinking it's going to be the same experience as Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. But I do have a similar praise for the world building, which is that the aliens, like you said, actually feel like unique species. They aren't just humans with prosthetics.
And they also felt like species and races that I hadn't seen before.
I loved I think the Andaluvians. Is that?
I don't think that's what it was.
Ksenia. I'll just say the character who we know. Ksenia is one of the ensemble, I'd say B tier main characters, just due to screen time. I'm not.
Andalvian.
Andalvian, thank you. Ksenia is an Andalvian, and the Andalvians communicate natively through changing colors on their skin, like a little cuttlefish, and it's very cool.
I really liked the Vishkent, who change form based on what they see in your memories. I thought that was neat.
I liked the fact that the young Vishkents couldn't control it.
Yes. Yeah, that was a great touch.
To me, that made it interesting. Because a shape-shifting alien, okay, I've seen that before. But having to learn how to control it and sort of being a reflection of all of the people around them instead of having the power is, I think, what makes that really interesting.
I think for me, it wasn't the fact that they shapeshift. It was their reasons for doing so and how they shapeshift and how they take a form based on your memory and not necessarily based on what they want to project.
Right. There's a lot of identity conversation in this book with, the young Vishkants who aren't necessarily in control of their appearance, to there's one character, Endirian? Endilian
Day, or Endymion Day? Something Day.
I think it's Endilian, whatever. They go by N. They have complete control over their appearance and can change like height, musculature, gender, hairstyle on a whim. And sort of those different ends of the spectrum for like figuring out one's identity when you have so much control over it.
And Endirian,
thank you.
Yes.
When you have so much versatility in it, and either being able to control it or not, and then also what that means for you yourself. It was very interesting, very, very thoughtfully done.
Yeah. I don't have anything to add because I think that you said all of it, but N was great as a character.
N was probably my favorite character. Yeah, they were fantastic.
Yeah. N was fantastic, but I think possibly my favorite character would have to be Threi, because talk about a trash villain.
He was absolutely, yes.
Everyone knows I'm a sucker for a trash villain, and Threi fits that definition.
If we're using the definition of a bad guy you don't know if you want to strangle or kiss, then yes.
Yes.
I will concur in this case.
Yeah. Morally dubiously moral, a little snarky, doesn't tell you anything, has their own secret agenda.
Yep.
Yeah. I wanted more Threi. I was like, man, I shouldn't like you so much, but I do.
N is definitely my favorite. Threi is great, but N is definitely my favorite character, not just because of my big ol' soft spot, but also because of all of the different conversations that come up around them and because of them. Not just the control over appearance and identity, but N is also a heavily augmented individual. That's how they're able to control their appearance, right? I think at one point they say the only thing left of them is their spinal cord and heart or something.
Yeah, they're mostly augment, and very little original is left to them.
And that brings up some really excellent, I don't want to say conversation, because it's not like conversations that characters have in the book, but
discourse, discussion,
thought experiment around the idea of, again, the concept of self and augmentations and where that line is and how these things can affect you, not just physically, but also psychologically. The character of N is not only incredibly charming, but also was used to bring up a lot of very interesting points in a lot of these areas that I think sci-fi really shines in, the ability to talk about that you wouldn't be able to in a book set in the real world.
Yeah, I think sci-fi provides a vehicle for this kind of conversation more so than contemporary fiction.
I mean, you couldn't have a character with a prosthetic leg and go, but are they still human? That's not going to fly.
Maybe not.
So, Sarah, why should you read this book?
You should read this book if you like fast-paced science fiction with some really interesting world building, animal companions, a trash villain, and a really great ensemble of characters.
You should read this book if you have patience for capitalism, doom and gloom.
There's a lot of that in this book.
And we cannot overstate the violence.
There's a lot of violence too.
Like extremely visible, graphic on-screen violence, which, I mean, works for this book. You know, the action is very well done and it keeps it moving even when you're a little bit frustrated with the characters. But I think anyone who picks it up should go into it with their eyes open.
Yeah, it's not the kind of thing that you really want sprung on you necessarily.
I also think if you have a little preview of it or something, Kindle does that, right? You can just read the first couple pages or something.
I think so.
You'd probably figure it out pretty quick. To avoid spoilers, skip to 1:01:53. Okay, I wanted to talk about this quote earlier, but I did not want to give away the fact that N survives. Just because any of the characters surviving this book is frankly a miracle. So I didn't want to take that away. Although I don't think any of the main characters actually die. Even Lita comes back from the dead. So Hansen tricks us into thinking that this is a high stakes book and then actually doesn't hurt anybody or doesn't kill anybody.
But I do kind of love that Lita's back, because I think it sets up a lot of, and I don't know if I'm right or not about when she actually comes back, but I think that and I thought this before I got to the end, I think that she is the figure that Threi gives to the Unity Prime?
Yes.
Abris?
I think that's almost definitely the case. Did you read the little preview of the second book at the end? I
didn't, because I have the second book pre-ordered and I want to just read it all when it comes out.
Okay. I don't think they ever confirm it either way, but I mean, yes, she is with Unity.
She is with Unity.
Yeah, so that's not what I wanted to talk about.
No, but on the other hand, we do, in terms of character death, I don't think that Caden's mother or father are going to come back. So we do see some actual impactful deaths.
Right, but it's none of the main characters. But because those parent deaths come so early, we're on edge the entire time thinking it could happen.
Yes.
It has been set up as possible in this world, even though they actually all make it out fine. Not unscathed, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. No one dies.
Yeah. So this quote from Kaiden to Endirian at the very end, after everything is said and done, Kai is getting a tattoo and he says, "I'm free now, free to put whatever I want on this body because it's mine." And it's just a throwaway line, but it really does sort of mesh with my conception of tattoos and how they really are the truest expression of bodily autonomy. They're something that you do to yourself for no reason other than because you want it and you feel like it. And there's something really wonderful in that. And I'm glad Kaiden was in a place where he could do that at the end.
I am too. And it feels really well deserved. I mean, given that he starts out as a slave and he's kind of reclaiming his sense of self partially through reclaiming that brand.
It's even worse because one of the first things he goes through is finding out he had been a slave. Right? He didn't even know. And so having that, his sense of self ripped from him so violently, witnessing the death of everyone he had ever known.
Violently and entirely.
Yeah. And then discovering that he had been bred to be a cog in a machine and like having his personhood taken away. And then finding out that wasn't even necessarily true because he was actually bred to be a super soldier and got sent there in the wrong shipment.
Although that's still kind of being bred into slavery when you think about it.
Oh, no, it definitely still is. But he had gone from, well, at least I was one of the special ones to, wow, I was completely meaningless, to, oh, I was one of the special ones, but I still don't like them for it, to being able to build himself back up from the ground up, basically.
Poor guy goes through a lot.
He really does. And again, he's 14. I get that he makes bad decisions. It's just hard. It's just not fun to read about. I think what I really blame the crew, right? The adult characters who he sort of falls in with, and neither side really commits to that relationship. But they're there. They're trying to help him. At the bar, when the enforcers come in and they're like, hey, child who just saw these people complicit in murdering everyone you've ever known, just sit here and act cool. Don't worry about it. Like, they could have shuffled him off to the bathroom or something.
They definitely could have.
There.
Yeah, they could have done more.
They shouldn't have expected him to be able to handle himself.
I agree, but I also don't think that they really quite understood his level of trauma.
Still, like, why did he have to sit there and act nice when he could have just left? Forcing him to stay there and act cool was just not
cool.
Yeah, clearly unrealistic, and they should have known better.
They should have.
Like, because even if he wasn't that traumatized, it would still be a shitty situation to go through.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have any arguments. For once, I agree with you.
Like him, I don't blame him because, he's a kid. It's awful. And it is awful, not he is awful. But they are adults and with varying levels of competency and emotional intelligence.
And trauma themselves.
Right. But that, like, I'm just saying I lay more blame at their feet.
Yeah.
For the cycle at the beginning of frustration.
Yeah, I think that they tried. I don't always think their attempts worked. I don't think that they're blameless.
I think that because they tried but didn't actually fully...
They didn't commit.
Admit? Yeah. They didn't.
Yeah, like they tried but didn't commit to it.
They would let him get into trouble because they didn't want to get involved. But then they would get involved in the fallout and then get mad about having to deal with the fallout. And I was like, well, if you had just gotten involved earlier, then you wouldn't have to deal with this fallout. Like, stop letting him get into trouble if you're going to complain so much about it. Anyway.
I did actually kind of find that realistic, though, because isn't that kind of how families work a lot of the times?
Doesn't mean I like reading about it.
No, I mean, that's fair.
I mean, that's like with the capitalist hellscape. Do I think every living creature is going to get exploited by the machine? Yeah. Doesn't mean I like reading about it.
I mean, fair.
I felt that way about, I just watched Don't Look Up, that Netflix movie?
I have heard the title. I have heard that it is good. I know literally nothing about it.
It's super good. You would hate it.
I'm sure I would.
It's a very sweet movie on a character level, but it's a completely horrifying movie on a wider, like, societal level. And I feel like that way about this book.
Yeah, there's some horrifying society going on here for sure. One thing though, and we've been talking about the crew and how they essentially are Caden's found family. And while the story does circle back to that, I absolutely thought they were going to be there the entire time. And so I thought that was a really cool like subversion where they're not actually relevant for a good third of the book.
When Kaiden leaves with Threi, that's when shit gets real.
Yeah, that's where we both started really, really getting into this book.
So for anyone listening who doesn't intend to read it, Kaiden is with his found family, but one of the enforcers, Threi, so one of the people who had kept his people enslaved, convinces him to like go with him because Threi also wants to murder the prime of that
Casthan, I believe.
The Casthan, yeah, mafia family or whatever the fuck.
That group.
Clan. And Kaiden goes with him. And that's like, wow, I completely believe it.
And like, you can see why he makes that decision.
Well, the crew are very reasonably, for once, trying to convince Kaiden to not go on a vengeful rampage. And Kaiden is like, oh, no, I gotta go on a vengeful rampage.
And he's also struggling with the fact that he's learned that just by nature of his genetics, he can essentially control people with varying degrees of success depending on species. So he's wondering, like, do the crew actually like me, or are they just doing what I tell them to do because I have this power to control them? So I have to leave for their safety.
That aspect of free will and questioning the actions of the people around you is such delicious horror to me.
It's a really interesting exploration in this book.
Right, questioning people's motives, that's the word I was looking for, motives. Not from a, are they trying to screw me over standpoint, but do they even really mean it?
Do they have a choice?
Yeah.
Am I leaving them a choice?
Right. And that idea that he could be influencing people to be kind to him without even realizing it is bone chilling.
Yeah.
And I think explored very well in this book. I mean, I don't think he actually comes around to it ever. But the concept is explored in the book. He doesn't really come to terms with it.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
There's a line at the end that I really liked. Kisinye is admonishing Kai for being a big dummy, basically. Because Kai is complaining about his graven powers for, being able to control people and how that's bad, which is fair.
I mean, he has a point, and he's seen what happens when this power is used not for good.
Well, he did very recently witness Threi use this power to convince hundreds of people to kill themselves. So, like, not great.
Threi, my trash villain, my darling trash villain.
Yeah. Kisinye is not your darling trash villain. He is my darling reluctant hero.
He is a good person, and thus I'm less interested in him.
But he's telling Kai, basically, get the fuck over yourself. He says, you are not more noble for refusing to admit your genetics have been a gift. And I thought that is a good line. Good line. Because, I mean, yeah, he never would have survived without them. They are definitely, I'm going to use the word problematic, even though I don't like that word. But they still benefited him in the long run. And I'm really glad Ksenia was there to shake some sense into him.
Yeah, I think that his genetics are nuanced, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're not entirely evil because you can't, like, that's not a thing when it comes to genetics, but they're not entirely good either for how you want to live in the world and interact in the world.
I side eye. Now, maybe this is true, but we get a lot of internal narration about things that are stated as true fact, but are not necessarily, because they're just Kaiden's interpretation or his understanding. Like when he decides Lita must have been murdered in the very beginning of the book, and we do find out that that was not the case. He seems to think that he is using it without realizing it, and that there's no way for him to turn it off. And I don't think that's true. I think that's just him being angsty.
Yeah, I don't think that we have enough information specifically to know whether or not that's true. Like we see Threi, who uses it pretty much constantly, but we're not in Threi's head. We don't know if he's using it intentionally constantly,
Right.
or if he is able to turn it on or off or adjust the level of intensity. Well, we know that he can kind of amp it up.
Right. And the fact that you can amp it up makes me think you can pull it back. I don't know. That's just my guess. I'm saying that the only person who insists that it's constant is Kai, who clearly doesn't know anything about it. So I don't know why he thinks that's the case, but whatever.
I mean, it fits. He's kind of a Russian headfirst sort of character, so it fits.
Well, that's true.
This is the information he thinks that he knows about it, so this is what he's taking as gospel.
And I'm saying I, as a reader, question that.
Yeah, which I think is kind of the point.
Oh, yeah, of course. We also have a very interesting character, Cilia. Cilia
is how I pronounced it. I don't know if that's how it is supposed to be pronounced.
Well, Cilia, I think, sounds better than any of my attempts. She is one of Threi's sort of employees, groupies, who was genetically engineered to be extra susceptible to these powers. And so we also get some really interesting interactions between Kaiden and Cilia. There's a point where Kaiden won't even ask her a question because he's worried that he'll influence her on accident. And Endirian is like, I'll ask the question. See, she gave the answer. It's fine. And that is the kind of pragmatic, go get him attitude that I like from N.
N is great. Although I think that Kai is being very sweet when he refuses to ask her questions because he doesn't want to unintentionally influence her. I don't necessarily think that's the right thing to do, but I think it's sweet intentions.
Oh, no, I agree. But I also think the answer was obviously to have someone else ask the question.
Yeah.
Like that. He was just going. So the question was, would Cilia, travel with them for a period of time?
Yeah.
And
he wasn't going to ask the question.
He was going to insist that she leave, which is worse, dude. If you're trying to get her to do free will. Like, that's not how that works at all. But he's still pretty young.
He's physically 20, but really not emotionally 20.
No. So
because he gets aged up. We've been calling him 14. He gets aged up. Accelerated, I believe, is the term used in the book.
So he gets 6 years of physical and, he gets mental development too. He gets to learn a bunch of shit.
He gets the mental development, but I don't think he gets the emotional development necessarily.
Oh, no, I agree.
Yeah.
He learns what all of these different alien races are, but he still doesn't have any experience interacting with them.
Yeah, exactly.
All of that is to say, like, I agree that his interactions with Cilia are obviously coming from a good place. I just think his solution is not actually
practical or good.
If he doesn't want to force her to stay because of issues of free will, forcing her to leave does not give her more free will.
Well, it's a good thing that he has N with him.
It's a very good thing. I realized I wanted to talk about my frustration cycle in the spoiler section.
Do you have anything else to add to it?
Well, I mentioned that they do break out of it because they do. And Kai's character development is actually very rewarding in the novel as a whole. And I just didn't want to put that in the non-spoiler section. But I did want to say that. It was all worth it in the end.
Yeah, and I do think that we need the frustration that comes from seeing him repeat his mistakes in order to really appreciate the growth that he goes through.
Oh, I agree completely. Yeah.
But that doesn't make it any easier to read about.
Well, knowing there's a light at the end of the tunnel, I think would help, actually.
That would help in retrospect. But
yeah,
assuming that we're going into the book with no knowledge, which is what we did, that doesn't help us.
I think my experience of reading this book was the exact opposite of my experience reading Gideon the Ninth. Where this book was a little hard for me to get into, but I did, and it was so rewarding, and I felt so good at the end. And all of their victories were earned, and they weren't easy, but they did it, and they grew as people, and I'm so happy for all of them. Whereas in Gideon the Ninth, I loved that book from page 1, and the ending just threw it all in the dumpster.
But we're still reading books 2 and 3 for the podcast this year.
Yeah, only because you're making me.
Does that mean I can make you read the sequel to this book for the podcast?
Yeah, I would happily read the sequel to this book. I did read the secret little preview for it because I didn't want to stop.
I thought about it. I really did think about it. But then I was like, well, after the secret preview, I'm still going to have to wait. And I don't know. I think it would be harder to stop like 30 pages or however many pages into the second book than it would be to stop at the end of book 1.
Can I give you a teeny tiny spoiler?
You can give me a teeny tiny spoiler.
It's 10 years later.
Well, no, that wasn't part of the story continues. We got the 10 years later in the end of Nophek Gloss.
Oh, okay. I didn't know if you considered that the preview of the next book or not.
I considered the preview of the next book to start where it says the story continues in Azura Ghost.
See, I'm someone who doesn't even read book summaries before I read a book. So to me, that would count.
No, I read up until page 394, which includes the 10 years later, because that was a chapter of this book. But I didn't read anything. Oh, I guess
no,
we just get a glossary.
Say anything about.
No, it doesn't. Okay.
You had to go all the way past the author biography to get to the 10 years later part.
Yeah, well, I didn't read the 10 years later part, but
you knew that the sequel was 10 years later.
Well, because the last chapter of Nophek Gloss is 10 years later.
The last chapter is?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So
that's
forgot how much of it was the preview and how much of it was the end of this book. Oh yeah, there it is. The last chapter, 10 years later. Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, chapter 50 is 10 years later.
This didn't have to be a spoiler, but I forgot to mention it. I really love that the chapters have titles. I don't think...
I honestly didn't notice it.
You didn't notice? Oh no, I really enjoy that. I don't think books have to give their chapters titles. It's not something I would ever ding a book for in my mind. But I just think there's something so nice about that framing strategy.
I like it, but I also never read chapter titles, so...
Well, you should. What about like in Dune, where there's even like a quote and everything?
Well, I read the quote because that's part of the chapter, but I don't read the chapter title.
You don't think the title is part of a book?
Not a chapter. I mean, I think a chapter title is icing. You don't have to eat it in order to enjoy the cake.
No, but the baker intended for you to.
Well, the baker's going to have to be okay with me sometimes scraping it off because I get too excited and just want to start the chapter.
Oh, but that's part of it. Oh, okay. All right.
Literally what my issue is that there's usually too much gap between the chapter title and the beginning of the actual chapter. And my eyes skip down to the beginning of the actual chapter.
I don't think that's gonna fly.
No, that's what, 4 or 5 spaces? You gotta
text
put it
is so much bigger.
But my eye skips to the big like paragraph
letter.
Yeah.
I think that's a you problem.
I
don't think that's a book format problem.
I never said it wasn't.
All right.
I'm not claiming this is a problem for anyone but me.
Well, you're missing out. Chapter titles are good, and this book did them very well.
I think chapter titles are fine. I just tend not to read them. I'm not saying that I'm right. I'm not saying that this is the way you should do it. I'm just saying this is the way I do it.
I'm saying I think you missed out. It adds just a nice little frame. It's a framing strategy, but also, yeah.
But sometimes they tell me what the chapter's about, and I don't want that.
Do you also dislike it when they're told out of chronological order? Because they tell you what's going to happen before it happens?
It depends on the story.
All right.
Hey, you have an irrational distaste of first person. Let me have my irrational non-reading of chapter titles.
Okay, that's what that's going to have to be. Because, oh man, did you see the review of Dune that complained about the spoilers at the beginning of each chapter? Because that's what you sound like right now.
I did not see that. But see, I don't mind quotes. I'll read quotes.
But they tell you what's going to happen.
Not always, but I don't know. I don't really know how to articulate this. It feels more immediately related to the chapter in a way that doesn't detract from my enjoyment of it. I don't know. I mean, it's really mostly, it really is just that my eye skips over chapter titles.
I mean, you moving too fast to read the chapter titles, I am much more okay with.
Yeah. Like that's mostly what it is.
All right.
Like I just want to get to the chapter.
Okay.
Anyway, before we move on to our words are weird, I do want to say that I really liked the Nopheks.
Oh yeah.
Because we haven't talked about them yet. I mean, in the beginning, they are this kind of nightmarish thing that kills all of Caden's family. But then we see them later and he starts developing sympathy for them and they're actually kind of cute. And I like them.
He realizes, which excellent character development. Kaiden realizes that the Nopheks are exploited by the Casthan clan just as much as his people were.
Mm-hmm.
Like the Nopheks weren't doing this on purpose. They weren't the masterminds.
Yeah. It was the Casthan who killed his people, not the Nopheks.
Exactly. And the Nopheks were going to get murdered immediately afterwards anyway. So It's not like they had the better end of the deal.
Mm-hmm.
So Nopheks. Wargs? At first I saw them kind of like bears in my head, but then I saw them more like wargs.
I think wargs. I definitely think there's something a little really ugly cat-like about them.
Oh, they definitely have smushy noses.
Yeah, they definitely have smushy noses.
And scales, maybe?
I didn't think they had scales. Doesn't Cassinier talk about fur on them at one point?
Only they're like rough. I think they only have like a mane.
I definitely saw them as very cat-like.
Mm-hmm. Like the lion's mane.
Yes.
But anyway, I agree. His growth of acknowledging that and also us being able to see them more in a pet situation was very, very good and very sweet.
Yeah. I think this book really excelled at showing us character development.
Mm-hmm. And the banality of evil, there are no...
Yeah, it's not focused on an individual or focused on specifically like doing harm. It's just that capitalism does harm.
Yeah. And there are some good discussions in the book between characters about how killing the person who did these things is not actually going to stop them from happening.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, I mean, a good conversation, but sucks.
Yeah.
It's very shades of gray in a very good way.
It's not a happy universe.
No. I loved Threi's fate at the end. I thought that was perfect.
A+. It was so good. I mean, my poor precious Threi. I felt really bad for him, but also he deserved it.
Well, it was that or get killed, basically.
I just really like Threi.
Yeah, and this way he gets to survive. Isn't that better?
And come back as evil for book 2. Dubiously evil. I mean, I'm great. I'm looking forward to standing Threi in book 2 as well. I'm a sucker for a trash villain. What can I say?
There was a moment there that I kind of shipped it.
Threi and Caden?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that.
When they were developing camaraderie, when Kaiden went with him to the Casthan
Stronghold.
Yeah,
I could see that.
And he was like, "Oh, you have books and read and live in a garden. So many things I didn't know about you."
Can I say, though, so at the very end, Threi tells Caden that he can borrow one of his books on the Graven, and he says, "It's on a shelf in my room. You can borrow it. Don't dog-ear the pages. And if that's not love, I don't know what is." So, Lily, you had a Words of Weird for this episode.
Yes, I'm trying to look up how to pronounce it. Fecund. No. Oh, that's somehow worse.
I have never heard it pronounced.
Fecund?
I have never heard it pronounced out loud. I've always pronounced it fecund myself. I have no idea if that's correct. That's just how I pronounce it.
We are looking at how to pronounce this word, as well as how to say more interesting words in English. There are 2 different ways of saying this word.
Can you hear this?
I can. It's pretty bad.
As fecund, but you could also say it as fecund. It is also said as fecund or fecund.
Well, I hated every second of that.
Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Well, I did interrupt your very kind introduction. I'm sorry. But yes, I did run across the word fecund in Nophek Gloss, which is already a bad word because it never comes up in a wholesome context.
It makes me think of bunnies.
Sure, that's better than literally every other time I've heard this word used. But I think what makes it extra bad is that it just reminds me of the word fecal, and that's not a good image.
They share a lot of letters.
I'm sure there's no linguistic root. I hope there's no linguistic root. But yeah, it's just not. I don't like the word. It's never okay. I guess bunnies is an okay context, but you never hear it like.
Also, bunnies makes me think the Buffy the Vampire Slayer musical episode with Anya singing about bunnies.
That's very off topic.
That is very off topic, but that's what I thought about. Sorry, not sorry.
No one uses the word fecund in the context of, "Oh, my partner and I have been trying for a baby for so long, and I just got the test results back and I am fecund." Like, yay! It's never that. It's always this strange other object creature can be exploited. Like it's never used. So it.
Well, but doesn't it just mean fertile? Yeah, like it's not that you're pregnant specifically. It's just
right.
that. So you wouldn't say I'm trying for a baby and I'm fecund.
Well, you would if you've been trying for a baby and it's not working, and so you go get a test to make sure you can even have one to begin with. That's a thing.
Okay, I guess that's true.
I mean, but my point is, no one ever says that.
No one uses the word in normal conversation.
Or in happy contexts at all. It's always weird objectification.
Yes. Yeah, it's true.
So that plus it really just reminds me of poop. Were you looking up the linguistic roots? There's no way there's any overlap.
Here is a Reddit post, so you know it's got to be correct.
Well, if they agree with me, then it is. Yes, 100%.
Let's see. Fecal is closely related to defecate. They both stem from the Latin fex, meaning grounds, sediment, dregs, but the origin of fex is unknown. Fecund stems from Latin fecundus, meaning fruitful, fertile, productive. The word comes from the PIE root DHEI, and I am spelling those out because I don't know how they're supposed to be pronounced or if they're supposed to be pronounced, meaning to suck or suckle. Other English words derived from this same root include female, feminine, felicity, fetus, and filial.
All of those words are fine. I cannot tell you why.
Wait,
those are fine.
Let me tell you the sources.
Okay.
Sources: Edam Online for fecus and fecund.
All right.
That was it.
Thank you. I'm glad that there is no overlap there because that would actually make it worse. I would rather it just be in my head.
Yeah, I think, according to, again, Reddit, I think that they have different etymologies.
The only overlap there could possibly be is if feck somehow meant full of. It doesn't. That's not true. No one quote me on that. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts and follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.